26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Okay, we got a quorum, thank you. Karen's going to come and read our relational covenant.
It'll also be on the screen.
Good morning. Jesus, at the end of ministry, took time to pray for the church. His prayer, after all of his teaching, miracles, love, and mercy, was for our unity. The Apostle Paul, reinforcing that point, reminds us that we are one body, united under Christ, unified through the transforming love of Jesus Christ. As the people of MCC, with Christ as the center of our lives and our community, we are committed to living by faith, being known by love, and being a voice of hope in all aspects of our lives. To live by faith, we strive to be genuine followers of Jesus Christ. We will, by faith, trust that those with whom we interact are well-intentioned disciples of Jesus. When we inevitably come into conflict, our faith calls us to keep our communication, actions, and attitudes Christ-centered, to be known by love. We seek to know Jesus more deeply and emulate his actions in our lives. To show our love for one another and the world, we will value our relationships over outcomes. We will actively encourage one another, love in and through our disagreements, and always seek to listen to, respect, and cherish one another. To be a voice of hope, we choose to hold tightly to outrageous hope. In our relationships with one another, we will listen and encourage while speaking honestly and humbly, constantly honoring one another, and trusting God is working through each person who is called by God's name. By making these commitments and living in community, it is our shared hope that we become a people united through the transforming love of Jesus Christ, shining as a beacon of hope to the world around us.
Okay, Pastor Brad.
All right. Hi, everybody. Here's my clicker. I need my notes. Notes are a good idea. Okay. I want to, Jenna mentioned this is a time we get to talk a little bit about what's kind of coming and going in the life of the church. And so I want to have a chance this morning to share a little bit about the budget that we're going to hear about this morning, but also the bigger picture thing about budgets in general and how we see this particular iteration of Monadnock Covenant Church's budget looking forward into the future. So there's some vision stuff here as well. But I don't often have a chance to talk about how budgets work, and not generally because I trust that you're all adults and like have your own budgets and know how to balance a checkbook. Specifically church budgets, because church budgets are incredibly odd, is really the bottom line here. So church budgets are very different than what we normally do. So if you think about how you budget in your own life, I'm assuming that you take your income, that you are pretty solid, that you're gonna have your income, and you say, okay, well, here's the expenses, we got our mortgage, we got the car, we got the utilities, we got whatever, and you balance everything up and you're good to go. And in a business, you can take a look at that and say, hey, well, I need to bring in 3 more clients, or I need to sell 300 more units of whatever, and you can kind of make those things move around and work. But at church, our income is entirely via donation. And so we don't have more clients to add. We don't sell more things. I can't bring in a sales team to go out and drum up, excitement for a product, et cetera, et cetera. That's not really the point of that. And in the past, this is a conversation we haven't really needed to have. And this is what's important and part of what we're looking forward to here. Because in the past, across most of our shared memory, whether it's us, our parents, or even our grandparents, and that goes for everybody in this room, no matter how old you are, existing via donation, essentially, has been entirely sufficient. We haven't had to think about where the church's income comes from very much. But that's changing. And it's changing really fast. And specifically in New England, it's changing very fast. I would imagine you've already read through this slide a little bit. But churches are changing across New England and across the world. Specifically, the most recent study that I saw that took data from just the last couple of years, New Hampshire and Vermont have the lowest church attendance across the country. I'm pretty sure then it's Connecticut and then it's Massachusetts. Maine is right around there as well. Anything we got in common with those states? Right, New England has the lowest church attendance in the country. And specifically with this data, it's 90% of the people attend church less than once a month. And so it's one time a month to 2 times, 3, whatever. It's never once, et cetera, et cetera. So that last 10% of people are attending somewhere between 12 and 52 times. So if you're in church once a month, congratulations, you're in the top 10%. But for churches, that presents a problem. Not really a problem, a challenge. Or an opportunity. And the opportunity is to think flexibly. The challenge is that this is happening really, really fast, and our brains aren't designed to deal with change on this scale at this speed. There's actual science behind this. It's a lot of people have done work on, and it basically triggers a kind of flight, fright, freeze response, which is a really hard thing to say. But it's that response when you're encountering danger, right? Well, are you going to go towards the danger? Are you going to flee from the danger? Are you just stuck? And we're all kind of constantly dealing with that because that's how fast the changes are happening, and we are forced to think creatively. And the reason I'm saying this is because there's some long-term implications for this. But I want to just kind of put that landscape, that big picture landscape in your head, and think about specifically MCC's church budget. And this is how church budgets have always worked, but we haven't had to talk about it. And so there's two things that we're going to be doing today. One is we're going to have a financial report from last year. The other is we are going to talk about a budget for next year. And in every other area of the world, those two things are connected. In churches, last year is a nice reference, but it really has no bearing on this year. And so I'm going to ask you to build a wall in your brain. And on one side of it, we're doing last year, and on one side of it, we're doing next year. Because church budgets don't project income. They project need. And the income is then up to the people. In the past, we haven't had to think about this because it's been sufficient to just deal with giving and say, that's fine, that's just what we need to talk about. But as we look at the changing landscape of church in New England specifically, but also across the country, we're realizing more and more that our long-held assumptions about how things work, how churches work, are being challenged and challenged and challenged again. Again, this is not necessarily a problem, but it's something that we just need to be upfront about. This is why I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about this a little bit, because if we don't talk about it, we're going to continually be surprised when the things that used to work don't. Now, what we might find is that the things that we're trying don't work, but at least we're not going to be surprised when we thought they would work, right? We may be surprised either way, but that's up to God. That's okay. I'm not worried about that piece of it. I do want to emphasize a couple of things. One is, again, the church budget is built to project need, not income. Past years, here's the thing, past years are good references. There's good information. The finance team in particular, in general, they do an outstanding job of working with whatever data we have. This year, they did a really, really outstanding job of taking whatever we had, whatever response we had from people, and trying to figure out what is the giving going to look like based on what people say, which is an incredible amount of work. But we're the bottom line is, not to borrow the phrase, but to borrow the phrase, is that we're working with incomplete data. We don't know what people are going to give, because while our projected expenses are relatively easy to figure out when and where they're going to come, the giving is a week-to-week thing. And so, which this makes the finance team actually pull their hair out, because it's really, really hard to figure out how that works. We'll see when Ken gets up to do the budget presentation, we'll have a slide that has the average weekly giving over the last couple of years. And you'll see there's some decent fluctuations in those average weekly giving. And the thing is online giving is really helpful in tracking and projecting, so we have better information than we ever have. But no matter how much we do, we're always surprised. And a lot of times it's a good surprise. It truly is. Well, wow, there was a gift of fill in the blank. Sometimes it's $100, sometimes it's $5 more, sometimes we've had stock gifts, we've had really extraordinary gifts over the years. We never know when it's going to happen. We never know when it's going to happen. So this is why the budget projects need, we don't project income. All right. So here's the bit about the current streams of income. And I don't love this language, but I don't have better language, so bear with me. But our current streams of income is giving, right? This is the crucial and is always going to be the crucial source of income for a church. The reason for this is because it's a discipleship issue. It may not always be the largest income stream, but it's always the most important because it shows where people's hearts are. And so this is the thing that is so important that as we continue to see this, is that giving is and always will be crucial to the church because it is a discipleship issue. But what we're seeing in the way that landscape is changing, and I'm just going to use this as an example here. Even up until probably 3 years ago, there was this calculation that was never official, but kind of was how you did things. And it was, if you bring on a staff person, specifically if you bring on somebody, a youth pastor or a young adults pastor or somebody like that, who is geared specifically towards an age group that is, for lack of a better word, underserved in the church. If you bring on a staff person, they, especially for younger folks, children and youth, will essentially pay for themselves within 18 months because families will come with their kids. This was the operating assumption up until 3 years ago, probably. And I think it was about then that I started hearing people say, I don't know if that's actually true anymore. Because it used to be, if kids came to church, their parents would. Now, we have a lot of kids who are interested in church, but their parents are not. It's very, very different. It's very unusual. Nobody knows the answers, including me. So I'm not going to get up here and tell you I do. But things are changing, and we have to, because of that, we have to think practically about other areas of income. And this is not something that's like unusual in Scripture. If you read through Acts, you'll see that Paul used to make tents, right? That's a common story. When I read through the Gospels, it seems like Peter and James and John and Andrew were at their fishing boats quite a lot. They kind of bounced between, like, we're doing stuff with Jesus and we're fishing. They were around a lot. If you think, still in the past, but in their future, like monasteries, they make beer, they make cheese, they make jam, right? They sell things. There's always this other thing out there that is, do we need to think about other streams of income? And there's a lot of churches out there that have an endowment, that have different gift streams, things like that. That's not something that MCC has, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes because I'm not actually that concerned about that. But we do need to start thinking about this. So for us, there's rental income, how we use our building, and that's something to really celebrate. We've been working on that for a long time. We also have been talking about the Bridge campaign. That's been a really important stream of income. We have memorial gifts on occasion. Those are completely unpredictable, as are a lot of these other things. So what we can do, and here's where there's an invitation, because I've talked a lot about what's difficult, but what we can do is to think about potential streams of revenue. So for lack of a better word here, we're talking about fundraising. And this is not something that we have done much here at MCC before, but given the nature of church attendance and participation, it's going to be something that's really important in our future. Because we need to be creative here. I was reading an article about Princeton Theological Seminary recently, and some of the ways they're engaging with people who wouldn't otherwise maybe be around a seminary. There's the dean of the Princeton Theological Seminary, her name is Kenda Creasy, said, desperation is a spiritual gift. So it gives you a chance to experiment with things that 10 years ago were off the table. And that's happening everywhere, and we are no different. That's her quote about the seminary. Well, guess what? That's happening everywhere, and we are no different. We're not desperate, but we do need to be creative as we look ahead. There are several opportunities that we're going to have to think about fundraising, some things that we're going to do in order to bring people into and to invite you into. But I want to specifically invite each of us, and I want you all to share this with your friends and neighbors in the church, people that maybe aren't here this morning or maybe had to leave or whatever, is think about what you're interested in and your friends are interested in. Is that something the church could participate in? What are some things that we could do or should do or might try that maybe it's a one-off, maybe it's sustainable, we don't know. But that's going to be important. This is forward-thinking stuff, because the reality is, if you look at our budget and you say, wow, that's big, I wonder, there are several factors that have lined up at this point that are making us, again, the desperation idea of, this is the situation. We're not desperate, but this is where we're at. And we have a mortgage, right? It's big. It's a big mortgage. That's okay, but it's the reality. It's a macroeconomic thing that we have a big mortgage. But there's some church-specific things that I want to talk about for a second. About how churches work. Because again, I don't have a chance to do this all the time. It's not like a sermon-specific, sermon-appropriate way to be teaching, but it's important here. You have a mortgage is big. Now, in order to pay that mortgage, you have to have a certain level of income. That's just, like, this is actually just, balancing your checkbook stuff, right? Same for all of us. If we have an expense, we have to have a certain level of income to meet it. If not, you got to get creative. That's what we're talking about here. For all intents and purposes, that means we have to maintain a certain level of participation in the ministry of MCC. That does not mean, hey, invite your friends because we need their money. That's not what we're talking about. And I want to make that abundantly clear. That's not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is this social science called size dynamics, which is, there's been a lot of work done over the years specifically with churches, because churches kind of have an even playing field. It makes it easy to compare, because a church of like 12 people and a church of 1,200 people and 12,000 people sort of have a baseline assumption of what they are. So sociologists like to use churches. Go figure. Size dynamics is the science of explaining how people operate in different group sizes. Specifically in churches, is that if you want people to come and stay at a church, there has to be a certain level of staffing, because people feel connected when they know a pastor. So Pastor Brad, Pastor Jenna, Pastor Kat. It's not to say anything against you all. It's really important that you are making these connections. But what keeps people is that feeling of, I'm connected not just to my friend, but to the larger group via a pastor. So we have to maintain a certain staffing level. And we've seen this happen over the years, when we've had full-time staff leave, the congregation kind of shrinks to a size. And then when we bring people on, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it feels like there's more people here on a Sunday, right? And it's because there are. Like, those two observations that you kind of have in the back of your head are real. What it also means is that it is harder for a church with limited staff to grow from 150 to 155 than it is to grow from 155 to 200. There's this rubber band effect at that level. So we have to maintain a certain staffing level in order to maintain a certain level of participation in the ministries. And if either of those things start to come out of balance, then we start to have cascade effects that tend to be, in our case, with our mortgage and things like that, are going to be pretty unrelenting. And we're not worried about this. We have known this for a long time. Who's heard of the Bridge campaign? That's everybody, right? Nate, I'm glad you raised your hand. We knew this going into the Bridge campaign. Said, our two issues are staffing and mortgage. So we're going to work on making those two things more sustainable. And so we've set ourselves on this course that is a good course. But if we jump ship right now, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble. We have to follow this course of action through. All of which to say is that there's a question here of like, hey, Pastor Brad, are you telling us that we should be worried? And the answer to that is no. I don't think we should be anxious. You've all heard Philippians 4, 6, and 7, right? Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. What we have here at MCC is not anxiety, but urgency. We have a clear picture of what church is like in Keene. I did some back of the napkin math a few years ago with sort of a round number of like 65,000 people in Cheshire County. I don't know if that's exactly right anymore. I don't know, Bo, if you have any ideas, but it's something like that. And I just did kind of a tally of the churches I know in the area, and then added a couple hundred more people for the churches I don't. And there's maybe 2,500 people in a church on a Sunday morning out of that number. And I was doing that, 6, 7 years ago, trying to just do some calculations. So that jives with the big studies that we're seeing about how often people are in church, right? There's urgency here, but there's not anxiety. Because a healthy church is about a lot more than money. And this is what's really, really important. Is that Monadnock Covenant Church is, in many, many areas, a healthy church. There's no such thing as an entirely healthy church, just like there's no such thing as an entirely healthy body. Like, You know, we all go to the doctor, get our blood pressure checked, take medicines, get moles removed, do whatever, right? Like, there's no such thing as an entirely healthy body. There's no such thing as an entirely healthy church. But MCC is, for the most part, a healthy church because people are growing in their faith, making really often difficult decisions that come with deciding to be a disciple, not once, but every day. And Pastor Jenna and Pastor Kat and I, we see this all the time. And it's something that's a privilege to see because we get the full reports from so many people, but it's not often that we get to share some of those things, but it's really, really happening. But the other piece of this is that finances are part of that conversation. They're not the whole thing. But back to what our friend from Princeton said is, you know, finances can be an impetus for creative ministry. Because financial stability often brings about missional stagnancy. Story time. Everybody likes stories. About 6 weeks ago, we were down in Massachusetts at the East Coast Conference's annual ministerial meeting. So Pastor Jenna and I were there, Becky was there, and I was talking with a good friend of mine who's been a pastor on the East Coast for almost 12 years now. It's a long time, and he's been in the same spot that whole time. And he's been at a church where he started off as the associate pastor with youth responsibilities, very, very similar to what Pastor Kat is. So he preaches, he leads worship, as, again, Pastor Kat does, and also works with their youth group and a number of different things. And about maybe 3.5 years ago, the lead pastor resigned and went to a different church. And so they entered into a call process, which they're still in. And my friend operated as the senior pastor and the associate pastor with responsibilities for youth and leading worship, doing all the things. Like, he was a solo pastor for a while. They brought in an interim pastor who was there for almost a year. That person finished up their interim gig, went to another interim church where they could do some more interim ministry. And my buddy is back where he was 3 years ago, and he's banging his head against the wall. Because what he told me is, our building is paid for. We have an endowment. If I walk away from the church and turn the lights off, we make money. I can't get people to do anything. There's no urgency. There's no anything. And I joked, I was like, well, you know, if you send some of your endowment my way, then that solves my problem, it solves your problem. Like, we got options all of a sudden. Jury's out on if that's going to happen.
Happened in the past here, let's be honest.
It's true. There was an incredible gift from Thornapple Covenant Church a long time ago that was instrumental in getting MCC to where it is now. But stranger things have happened. But here's what I want to say as your pastor, is I would much rather figure out where the money's coming from than try to push you all out the door into the community. It's way harder to do. But I don't have to, because you're doing it. And this is what I mean when a healthy church is about more than money. Yeah, like, we got to pay the bills. And we had some tight times this last year, and God's been good through that. We're gonna hear some reports soon. The finance team has been working so hard. You guys have no idea how much time the finances team has done and work they have done putting into trying to understand and put forth something that makes sense here. But our job at the end of the day here, and this is in bold for a reason here, so our job, part of a healthy church, is simply to be faithful. God's job is the fruit. We take the step every day. Be faithful, be faithful, be faithful. And we don't know when the fruit's coming, but it does. It always does. Because that's God's job, and God is faithful. All right, this last one is very, very specifically about some of the long-term stuff. You can see I have longish term up there. So a brief look back. And this is familiar to a lot of you, but I want you to know this because you're going to get questions from people that you know in your small groups or whatever who are like, why should I do this pH check thing or whatever? So, first of all, pH check. This is a really, really, really good tool. It's been redone recently. There's about 100 churches in the denomination that have done it, and it's done by a PhD, like somebody with a doctorate in this kind of feedback gathering stuff. I don't even know what it's called, but she's incredibly good at it, and it's been a gift to the denomination, and it's going to be a gift to us. But the reason we're doing it now is because 3.5, 4.5 years ago, when we started the Bridge campaign, we started gathering feedback. What's important to the church? What are some goals that we want to do? What are some places that we want to be specifically paying attention to in the church? And we started working on those, and we started working on those, and we started working on those. And we've done a bunch of them. And some of them are still part of what we pay attention to all the time. Some of those areas are still points of emphasis. But we're getting to a point where that's far enough in the past that we want to check in again, which is what this is. We want to check in again and say, what's important? What do you see about MCC? Where are some areas that maybe we need to emphasize again? That because we were doing something else, we let that one go and maybe we want to give it some more attention, right? So PH check is going to guide some of the long-term decision-making over the next year and 2 and 3. Very similar to how these conversations around the Bridge campaign went 3.5, 4 years ago. Right? So that's why we're doing this again. The feedback from that is very, very important. And there are some other tools that then follow up with this that we are currently, I am planning on bringing into the conversation, but I'm going to wait and see how everything goes over the next couple of weeks. The second is, we want to introduce this idea of a financial strategy team that is, again, thinking about, all right, what's some creative ways that we can think about engaging with different parts of our community in ways that are invitational, that are community-oriented, but also may bring in some revenue. So that's something that we're getting off the ground here. Again, there's an invitation here to think creatively about fundraising, because I don't know what you all are good at. I mean, I know some of the things. I actually probably know a lot of the things, because I know a lot of you. But that means you have your other relationships in a lot of different places, and I don't know what all of those are. And we're also going to, part of this is we're going to continue outreach opportunities. And this is, again, I have this here because I want to emphasize this again. Money isn't the driving force in our ministry. It never is, and it never will be. We are not interested in serving money. We are interested in serving God. In Matthew 6 and Luke 16, both, Jesus says, you can't serve two masters. You can either serve God or you can serve money. We are not doing this because we are interested in serving money. We, as a church, are interested in serving God. Period. And because of that, we want our friends and neighbors to know Jesus. We want our friends and neighbors to experience the community that is happening here, that brings life and joy and support to people. We want to grow because we want to see people's lives transformed by the love of Jesus. There are really big churches that are really unhealthy. There are really small churches. There are churches that have closed, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because that happens sometimes. I don't think that that's in MCC's future. I also don't think we're ever going to be a big church. We don't need to be. That's not our goal. If our goal is to be big, we're doing it wrong. Our goal is to be faithful. Our goal is to see God's love spread through our community. And then the last thing on here is that it's similar to the PH check, and this is, again, a long-term thing, but we're going to continue to have some conversations with NCP, National Government Properties. They're folks who have their hands in a lot of churches, and so they know a lot of what's going on, how other churches are encountering this change that we've been talking about. So we want to pick their brains about that. We're going to continue to do that and work with our different partners, whether it's at Missional Vitality or at NCP or at the conference, at the denominational level. We're not trying to do this alone. Nobody ever gets anywhere alone. We want to do this together. And the last thing I want to say here is, again, on the long-term piece of this, is that this year in October is going to mark the end of the Bridge campaign. And the Bridge campaign has been an incredibly gratifying thing to see, the way that God's faithfulness has been evidenced through that whole process. And that was an intentional three-year piece here. And what you're going to see when Ken gets up here in a second is that there's we've been drawing a lot of Pastor Kat's salary from the Bridge campaign, which is intentional. So one of the reasons I'm introducing this idea of fundraising now rather than next year is because by this time next year, we will have done what we intended to do, which is get the mortgage down quite a lot, as well as give ourselves some breathing room to get Pastor Kat on board. But we need to be thinking about next year, this year, trying new things, establishing new rhythms, some of that stuff that again, I don't want to get into that desperation place where we're like really scrambling. Urgent, not anxious. Looking ahead, we know some of what's coming there. So we want to be working on it now, not when we're looking at the bank account being like, wow, there's 37 cents in there. Not ideal, right? So we're working ahead now to do that. So those are the long-term things, specifically tied to the way that we think about budget. But you can see here how the budget doesn't drive the church. The church drives the budget. Because we've identified that we need to be investing in the lives of young people. We've identified that this place is an opportunity for so many people to gather in the community. We've identified ways in which we can be hospitable, in ways which we can be welcoming, in ways which we can be Jesus' hands and feet in our community. We're going to continue to do that, and our budget reflects those priorities, not the other way around. So, with that, I'm going to invite Ken up to do the... We're doing other business first. I don't have the agenda in front of me, I'm sorry. Yes, we can do other business first. No, I think we're okay. Well, maybe, I don't know. Diane, do you want an agenda printed? While we're doing that, does anybody have questions about what I just said? Because I just threw a lot at you. Yeah, Dan.
Just an observation, because we came out from other spots and coming back home with all the seminary stuff and knowing that this is the mission field. And in essence, trying to work with my home church up in Sullivan and trying to shake the tree to get them to realize that the mission field isn't overseas anymore, it's here. And snapping out of that essence denial is a key thing for us to remember in being faithful, is it's here.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Good one. Steve.
Just have a comment.
Yeah.
It's a good presentation, very well thought out.
Thanks. Thank you. I have a very, it's a growing document on my computer about the various ways we're seeing change and involved in everything, and this is part of it, but it's not all of it. But if there's any other comments, I'm going to invite Diane up. We've got hopefully an update from Sapling Acres, maybe, and we'll let you do that, and then Ken's up.
Yes, I've been meeting with Sapling Acres because their lease goes from June to May. So I met with Nick and Alicia, and I have to tell you, they are so happy being here. They really feel the support of the church the church knows there's a need for quality daycare. And they really do feel like, even though we rent them the space, they feel like we've almost become a mission of ours to be serving with them. They had tons of good things to say about Brad, and about Dave Page and working with him, but they're really happy here. They are probably going to grow, as you probably read in the paper, the Child Development Center, CDC, at the college is closing, and they've had parents from there. It's not?
They're looking into funding it a different way.
Oh, because last time I read, people were going over to the Y.
People are dispersing because they're worried about staff
Oh,
leaving, because it's coming from a different area.
thank you for clarifying that. Anyway, there are parents who have come. They're trying to hire another person, and they're beginning to feel stable. We had asked for an increase of $250 a month. We've come to agreement with them at $150 a month increase starting this month. They also had wanted to do a 3-year lease where there were no increases, and we kind of said, no, I don't think so. So they do want to do the 1-year lease at a time, and they did have some requests, because they tell their parents what the tuition is going to be in September. They tell them in April. So they need to know by April if the rent is going up, so they can put it in their what they charge the parents. So that I'm hoping people will remember. So they're on vacation this week, but when they get back, they will sign the lease, and we're all set for a year. And building policy change, am I doing that, or are you doing that? Okay, I sure would.
Well, speaking of rentals, I think you've heard and noticed that this church is being used as a ministry center in a lot of ways, that a lot of places in the community are renting on a fairly regular basis, and it tends to happen that someone comes here for some event and then they use that again. I don't think we have much, what's the opposite of matriculation? People rent and continue to rent because they feel cared for. Christina does an amazing job with communicating. They feel welcome and at home at this space. And we're going to kind of continue to try, and leadership team has been talking about ways we can extend hospitality for those who walk in this door not to attend an MCC event or programming, and I think that's great. Karen Manlove has talked often about how this was originally called a ministry center because it was never meant to be the church building, but to be an outpost for the community. And as we're kind of doing that one building policy change, the leadership team has been kind of talking about and discussing for a while now, but this has finally felt like the right time, and we've kind of, over the past year, done some research and investigation about what it would mean for us as a church, is that we're going to be willing for people to have alcohol in the church, not necessarily MCC events, but if someone is renting the building, if they have a licensed and insured bartender, we're not looking to just be like, here's your open bar, drink whatever you want. But there have been multiple people who have approached us as well about wanting to have a fundraising gala here, or things like that sort of nature. And a lot of those events these days do often have alcohol available. And so it's been kind of limiting. It's still up to us whether we approve something or not. So it might be that that will be a case-by-case basis. And it does need to have a licensed and insured bartender. That's especially not only something we would want as a church for them to have, but also our insurance. That's like the one thing the insurance has said. If MCC ever wanted to serve alcohol, we would have to pay our insurance a little bit of money. So I didn't ever think that was something we would probably do either way, but that's a change. We also do think as a side effect, again, not the point, but that may help some of our rental income to have more people who are willing to rent, whether it's weddings or fundraising dinners or galas or things like that. So we're going to be working on those details on kind of what that alcohol policy is, if you will. But that's kind of a building policy change. We felt like that was a big enough one that we should at least kind of mention to the congregation and let you know that that's kind of a way we also view ourselves as something we're going to do to kind of be open to other places, but also hopefully help in the fundraising area, if you will. Okay, are there any questions with that? Either of those? Yeah, Misty.
How do we get the word out? Because we have denied people
Yeah, so I think that that's part of the conversations that we're starting to have. And we've had some, and I think that's also some of the financial strategy team has been like, should we say we're on a wedding thing? Should we put ourselves in this kind of, there've been a lot of what if, but I think having a team who really is good at some of that stuff, and frankly, Kat is, I mean, she has a background in marketing and communication, and so she'll kind of be good at that as well. But also, if you know of people that are asking, hey, I need a space. Like I was somewhere a few weeks ago and someone said, I can't find anywhere to hold my graduation party. And I said, oh, well, I don't know any of the details on some of this, but you could contact our admin. We have a big space. So, yeah, Stan.
Comment I want to make, I have been asked what it would take to have a performance here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that large groups need for a performance is a green room. Where they can gather.
Yeah.
We don't have that place here.
Sure.
And so, you know, in the long term, I mean, really long
Yeah.
term, if we really want to improve this as a community space, we need two spaces.
We need to have it in a green. Yeah, that's a good idea to be thinking through. All right. Stan was saying that he's talked to other people about whether or not, you know, like renting this as a venue, especially for concerts or performances. And the need would be that there's no green room to be for before that sort of event. But maybe that's something we could kind of think of how we could overcome that obstacle. That's a good thing to note. I had not thought of that before. All right, Ken, I think it's your turn now. Finally.
All right. Let's see what we get up here. First of all, good morning. I'm sorry, afternoon. Got past that morning part. That's Brad's fault. Somehow, I am the treasurer for this congregation. I'm not sure how that happened. Why they pick a poor man to be the treasurer is, I don't get it. But in my role as treasurer, I act as the liaison between the finance team and the leadership team. And I want to start this presentation today by sharing with you guys just how lucky you are to have the dedicated people that you have on these teams. The finance team is just, it's been said already, but they have just put in endless hours trying to figure out this budget, what's best for this community, this church, and how we can, we're getting to that. Before we, I want to publicly acknowledge who they are too, so that it's not just this team out there. But first, Brian Scott has headed it up for us back there. Christine Cavisto, I believe she's online, so she probably can hear it. Deb Hutchings has worked tirelessly trying to figure out on our income here. And Nate Manlove, who has been doing it for years for us now. But they have worked countless hours and have done so much in the planning, monitoring, and managing of all aspects of the budget. For many years, we're getting there. For many years, our bookkeeping has been professionally managed by Nathan Alexander's company, and it was a gift that we had for so long that I think we kind of took for granted at times, but it was quite a gift that we had to have this professional management and bookkeeping for our church. Circumstances changed, and Nathan's accounting company can no longer do the bookkeeping for us. And we were kind of in a conundrum, and we reached out, and Karen Manlove stepped up and said that she could help out with that. And she has led it so seamlessly to go from this professional accounting firm and doing it in-house on our own and not miss a beat has been just a real gift. And Nate, I know Karen's not here right now. Please make sure you let her know our appreciation for that. Now, before I begin talking about the actual budget, I do want to just jump on that. We talked a lot about tithing, and I do just want to make some brief comments here about our tithing. Our tithing is making a difference in and around our community. This budget proposal that we're about to look at is not just about the operations of this church. While it is a huge factor, we do have to pay our mortgage and our staff. But it's also about how this community of believers is sharing the good news and serving the needs of our community. This congregation has been faithful in their tithing, and I believe that many of you, like Becky and I, have had the opportunity to experience the joy and fulfillment you get from tithing. In fact, some of the most positive experiences we've had, Becky and I, have been when we've been pushed to tithe when we didn't have it to give. Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper, and whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." The act of tithing itself encourages collaboration and empathy within the community. As we support the communal needs and projects that are happening, individuals within the church and the community become more attuned to the needs of others and engaged in the community life. Becoming engaged in the mission and ministry of this church is an important part of the budget process. The engagement creates a positive loop where giving leads to more connections, and making more connections with each other and our community leads to further giving. As we go through this presentation today, I would ask that you be asking yourself, how can you become more involved in the ministry and the mission of the church? Tithing is so much more than just a financial transaction. It is an act of faith that fosters a generous spirit that can lead to spiritual well-being and growth. As we go through the budget today, I ask that you prayerfully take time to explore your current giving and ask yourself what God might be doing next for you, or be asking you to do next, How is God stretching your faith? Not just financially, but through participation and your finances. Please be thinking about this as we go through these different areas of needs and explore where we're spending our money. Before I present that, I'd like to pray with you. Heavenly Father, we come before you today as humble servants, seeking to discern your wisdom and plans for us in bringing the good news to this community. It can be so hard sometimes to see your plans, and we cling to to cling to our faith. So often, you work in ways that we cannot understand. We doubt your plans, and we try to rely on our own logic and only have you remind us that you are in charge and you have remarkable plans for us. God, help us to remember the freedom and joy we experience when we allow ourselves to rely on you. As we make decisions on financial plans for this church, help us to remember it's not just about the mortgage or the gas bill. It's not how much the staff is being paid or how much the insurance costs. Help us to remember that this financial plan is about providing every person that enters this building the opportunity to experience you. This building is here to glorify you. This church is here to bring glory to the people that enter into it. Let us use this as our guide in our discussions today. I ask this in your heavenly name. Amen. All right, we can go to the first slide now. This first slide has been changing drastically over the last week. Every day Brian sends me a new copy of just where we're at. We have been updating and updating. The good news is, well, if you want to break down to the bottom line here, that net operating gain and loss column right there. When we started putting these slides together, I think we had that, it was in the 20,000s, wasn't it, when we the first slides that we made? 20,000 negative. Then we came and we started making pleas to the congregation and letting you know, hey, we're in some tough times here. And the congregation has responded to the point where every week it just kept getting a little bit lower, a little bit. We were into negative a little less. And then last night, Brian finally said, I kind of couldn't believe it, we're in the positive by $5,785. Now, while that is reason for joy, I do want to say that it's also a precautionary tale here too. We've made some decisions that put us in that positive and ones that we need to revisit as well. For example, we made the decision to withhold tithings from our denomination, both regional and national. What was this, probably 4 or 5 months ago, in that range? 2 months is all? 2 or 3 months? Okay. So the few months that we did withhold, we need to be thinking, we're in a positive. We need to be thinking and discerning, are we making that up? So we made a decision to fund Kat's position at 100% for the remainder of this year from the bridge campaign. So we started drawing some more money from that bridge campaign. So there's some factors here besides just increasing giving that did help us get to that positive level. And I think we need to keep that in focus as we move forward too. We are not closing the books yet on the year. This is all still some estimates involved, and these numbers could still change a little bit. So be aware of that as well. But as we look at this, you can see our breaking down the whole slide here. Our unified giving came in at $282,000 for the year. Last year we were at $298,000, so we're actually down a little from our previous year and nowhere near what we were budgeting. Our bridge campaign, we drew down more than we had hoped, and we drew down into the into paying for the salaries and the $62,000. We also made disbursements from the bridge campaign, was it twice this year for paying down the mortgage? Yeah, I think 2 of them happened in this fiscal year. So that's also what's paying down. I mean, that's not coming in, figuring into these figures, but it's drawing down the bridge fund significantly. But that's what it was there for. We have, I know, since I started this is just my 2nd year of being a treasurer, that mortgage payment is about $500 less a month, I believe, since that time. So we're making some headway on paying down the mortgage. Other income you wanted, one thing I would like to point out there is to show that we have significantly increased the rent income that we're getting. And that's an area that we're hoping to expand on, but we also need to realize there's not a lot more room to increase in that. There's only so many days in a week that we can continue to rent this. Eventually you start to reach a saturation point with that. So I wouldn't expect this to, it almost doubled from the previous year. We can't expect to see that double again. It's to see some increase there is good, but not giant, significant increase. Okay, but and then finally, I would point out the average weekly giving. We are slightly down. Did this, Brad? Did this figure in the last month's income? Do you know? I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not sure either. And either way, it's going to be really close to what it was the previous year, what the average weekly is. Okay? And that just, it's really kind of not that important of a number, except in planning. For as we're paying bills and so forth, it just really does help us to know that we've got some steady income flowing in and what that's going to be. Okay. Next slide, I think, unless anybody has questions on this one. I think we're ready for the next slide. All right. Cause for celebration. MCC's faithful and sacrificial giving has showed God's work in us and through us. You guys have been fantastic in the giving. The people in this room, I'm sure, are this is our regular attenders here. And when we need it, you've stepped up. And as the treasurer, I can't be more thankful for this group of people. Increased participation in our youth program. One of the benefits we're seeing from that bridge campaign. And that's something that's continuing to grow and is cause for celebration. Community connections. Monadnock Interfaith Project, you just keep hearing more and more about that, and it keeps growing. And I'm hearing about it not just in here, but outside of the church as well. And seeing their presence outside of the church and in the community. We've made further connections with Covenant Living in Keene. We're seeing more of people from Covenant Living in Keene attending, which is always a fantastic thing. And especially when we consider that really is such a mission field for us, because that was a prior to the Covenant taking it over, it was a secular facility. And so many of those people are encountering, a lot of them are encountering Christ some of them for the first time here. So it's a real good mission field for us. Where was Covenant? Mortgage now versus years ago, I already spoke about that a little bit before. While we do have a huge mortgage, it's not as big as it used to be. Our payments are not as high as they used to be. We're making headway. There's a long road ahead. But if we stay on the path, financial freedom is there. If I was a financial planner, I could tell you. Cause for attention. Moving on. Actual expenses exceeded giving rental. Well, that's no longer cause. That's not true right now. We were saying that I'm looking at my slide that was printed last week. It says actual expenses were exceeded by giving and rental income by $16,000, and then I crossed that out. And then it says by $12,500, I crossed that out. Now it says we actually are our giving exceeded it by $5,000. Again, though, it's a little tricky to look at it that way. Cash on hand is 0.63 months as of April 30th. This is below the desired 1 month on hand. Now, this is an area of concern. I'm not sure exactly where it is right now. We're probably a little above the 0.63. May was an incredibly good giving month for us. So we've probably made some headway there. But at the same time, I can remember months this year where we were talking about, not months, we were talking about being down to days of cash on hand. And that was scary. And we need to make sure that that's not where we're going back to. We need to make sure that we are funding this budget in a way that allows us to have the security of some cash on hand here. So it's an area that we need to pay attention to. Next slide, please. So this is where we get to present what, that kind of talked about last year's budget. Now, this is what we have moving ahead. We have published the budget, right? That went out in email. So everybody got the proposed budget in the email. If you remember, you should have gotten that. That total of that with all the expenses comes to $429,000. We have a projected income of $387,000. And that's a difference of $41,000 there. Now, I will say, first of all, $429,000 is $11,500 less than last year's budget. So we're doing our best to cut corners where we can. While the projected income is kind of a mystery to most of us, Brad kind of talked about that in his presentation, I do want to acknowledge that the finance team, in our projections, we projected a much lower figure than what the leadership team is using here. So, yes, it's a mystery how much money is going to be coming in. Our best projections would have us having even less, although God keeps working in ways that surprises us, and maybe that's why we projected it lower, so we can be surprised. The leadership team strongly agrees with the finance team that it'd be unwise to project more from unified giving for this upcoming year than what we brought in last year. But the leadership team also feels that God is challenging us to at least meet last year's level of giving. This challenge is further reflected in our need to find alternative sources of funding. We need to increase our efforts in the area of fundraising, which is what Brad was talking about earlier. And I think that very soon you'll find that we are actually building a team to address that issue. We'll need to, you'll be hearing more about this in the near future from the leadership team. So, basically you see up there we've got a $41,000 in this projection, $41,000 difference that we are hoping fundraising and other donors can help to alleviate that gap for us. You can go to the next slide, please. How can MCC fund the mission this year? As individuals, what can we do? Number one, actively participate in the ministry at MCC. That's what I talked about earlier. Become a part of the mission. We need that, the growth that happens within and the growth that happens outside. This budget's a failure if we are not doing a better job of bringing the message to our community, of bringing the good news to our community. Prayerfully discern your ability to continue to grow in both in your activeness in the church and in your sacrificial giving. Invitational emphasis on compelling Christian community and transformative community outreach. I think that's more fancy words than what I just said. We have to continue to grow for this to be a successful budget. Maintain focus on deepening our discipleship. Actively pursue fundraising opportunities and deliberately explore ways to further use our building with the community. And that's partly what we were addressing with what Pastor Jenna was talking about earlier too, is the idea that some of the restrictions that we've had we're easing up so that we may draw more people from the community into the building use. Next slide, please. What does it mean for us to pass this budget? It means that we are, all of us, giving a significant commitment to increase our unified giving. It can't be one person that does it. We all have to give a little bit more where we can. We will need to proceed with we're hoping, we want to proceed with our current staffing resource allocation. This budget allows us to do that. That's one of the things that if we ever look at significantly decreasing our budget, the only places that we have really is in staffing. We can knock off a couple thousand here and a couple thousand there on little items. The only big ticket items are mortgage and personnel. Payroll and mortgages are the big tickets. It will represent faithful, discerned intentions for this current fiscal year. And then, given the uncertain economy, we will be monitoring financial thresholds and spending limits authorizations that were established by leadership team and finance team last year will continue. Right now, there is a $500 spending limit that any single spend other than bills, regular bills, has to be approved by 3 members of myself, the chair, and who's the third? Is it the pastors? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, and the finance team, so Brian, yeah. So we have to, that 3-way okay for any excessive spending right now is in place, and we will continue that through next year. Well, next slide. I've run out of paper here. I think it's what does it mean? Well, how do we monitor our thresholds? Okay. Well, I'm going to have to turn my head now. Prayer. You know, that's one of the things that is the easiest thing, that going back to that what can we do slide, that's really where that prayer belongs. What can you do is pray for this mission. Pray for this church. Pray for the pastors. Do it daily. The power of prayer is amazing. And if you've ever been on that receiving end, you know that there's times in your life where you can feel that prayer coming for you. And I think we need to just cover this place with that prayer, with those prayers, and that we need to do it on a daily basis. Communication to our body. We need to constantly be telling you how it's going. This congregation's amazing when we have needs, the response that we've been getting. If we don't communicate those needs, It's tough to get the response. So it is something that needs to be ongoing, the communication with, and the updates and reporting to you. Spending freeze. Let me see, this is threshold, how do we monitor? If we find that the need is there, there will be a spending freeze. That's the first step in addressing any lack of funds. Pause our tithing payments to regional. This is something that, to regional and national denomination, this is something we were forced to do this past year. We do not want to continue to do that, nor does this budget that we're presenting have that figured into it. This budget that we're presenting continues the payments that we to tithe. I can't stand up here and ask you all to be faithful tithing and then say as a church, we're not going to do that. There's a little bit of a dilemma there. So that's something that we need to continue to do and monitor. However, I do want, that is a place where when we can't, we were forced to, we got down to that point this year where we were, well, I can't say we were unable. Our bank accounts got low, put it that way. And we knew that we had to do something to stop the bleeding, so to speak. And that was one of the choices we made, was to freeze that tithing. Now, to your credit, I'm hoping that we can go back and make up some of that back to the denomination. But it is an area that, should there be trouble, it's a place where you can stop and stop the flow a little bit. So, we are going to invite National Covenant Properties to be. We want to invite them and gather information from their expertise. They have people who have been through the things that we're going through, and they have helped other churches go through similar scenarios that we are seeing. They have the experts. They're at our disposal. We need to use them. And we're going to invite them in and ask them to come on board as advisors to us as we figure out our financial plans. And the last thing is, should things not go well? I said this before, the only places we can't stop paying our mortgage. I suppose we can always try and refinance it, but we can't stop paying it. The only place where there is that are big ticket items is mortgage and staffing. So reductions in staff would be one of the, hopefully the last areas we'd have to look at. But if we're unable to meet this budget, we can't ask our staff to come in and work for nothing. So, and we can go to the next slide, please. What it means for us if this budget does not pass. The leadership team will represent represent a revised budget. We'd have to go back to the drawing board. If you tell us this is unacceptable, we can't support this. Leadership team has to go back to the drawing board and start trying to make some of those hard cuts that I was talking about. If we don't pass it, it will represent our faithfully discerned intentions for, that's what happens in. Either way, okay. And we will continue to monitor financial thresholds. So the big thing is we have to put together a new budget. If it didn't pass, we have to re-establish a budget, bring it back before this group again, and vote on it. And that would have to happen fairly quickly, because we are at the end of our fiscal year. So we would be operating without a budget. Yikes. So, and I think we're on to our questions is what we're on to. Stan. By the way, we do have a good part of the financial team here too, and I may be calling on them to help me answer questions because.
Well, I have two questions.
Okay.
What would happen if we worked without a budget? Would we be able to pay anything?
I'm having trouble understanding that from the way it's come through.
What would happen if we didn't have a budget? Would we not be able to pay any bills?
If you didn't have a budget,
Approved budget. Oh, I have one more question.
no, we would have to pay our bills. We would run out of money real quickly, though.
My
I mean,
second,
I would take it if we didn't have a budget. I imagine that we'd still have some money flowing in from giving. And Nate, go ahead. Nate's got a comment.
When we had the semi-annual meetings at a later date, we would start the fiscal year off without an approved budget, and it was just because of timing. I think, could you pay bills? Sure, but you don't have a guiding document that's guiding us missionally and also financially, and so we'd be making financial decisions blindly.
Debbie and I downloaded the document that we received as an attachment, which was a more detailed budget, which doesn't comply with the numbers you had up there. Apparently, it's been changing very quickly.
It has, yeah.
Where will we get a final document?
I can give you a copy of the final document. There's one on the copier at the moment. I have not sent it out yet, but as Ken said, because of where we're doing the meeting and when the books close, the most updated snapshot was on the screen. That was from today. The books won't close for another couple of weeks, so it depends on which of these versions you're asking for.
Right.
What Brad sent out in the email, that's the final budget. It has last year's budget and this year's budget. That's not changing from here. The one that was sent out yesterday.
Yeah, I believe there were a few differences that leadership team were, saying where is the actual need, or they're minor in the changes on expenses. The big numbers of paying attention to are the income of unified giving and then the final number of what we expect our expenses to be. The income has kind of been changing and fluctuating because leadership team was saying, we think we want to challenge the congregation to meet what giving was this year. It doesn't feel faithful to say either, hey, we took in $287,000, but we're going to budget $282 because we think we can hopefully do that. So that's the number that's really been changing. If there's any minor details, those may be accidents.
Yeah, I don't think any changes have come in what our plans to spend are. And that's one thing, I guess, that hasn't been addressed in any of this, is that we have all salaries have maintained, we're flat. We have figured in some of the things like some utilities and stuff, we've 10% increases. Those are our best educated guesses as we budget for those types of things, knowing that there may be some increases coming. Healthcare was 10% as well increase, I believe, that we budgeted for. Or did we have real numbers that by the time we actually published? I can't remember. No, so, yeah, because that's December that they change, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and I think part of it too is some of it is, to all of it is the guesstimate, right? We don't know what our utility bill is going to be. And some of it's we monitor based on what income is versus expenses. It's a constant monitoring game. It always has been. So that's why you see that we've spent a lot less. It's not necessarily that we didn't have the needs. It's that we didn't spend it because we didn't have it. So a lot of it will be continuing to monitor income, whether it's unified giving, fundraising, rentals. All of this it changes throughout the year. But this is our best intention.
Correct. And all we can do is follow that's part of what that finance team spends all those meetings doing, is trying to figure out what the best case scenario is going to be. We can't predict how much snow is going to fall when we try and figure out what our plowing budget's going to be. All we can do is look at past trends, what has cost us in the past, and try and figure from that point, et cetera. You know, that would hold true for just about any, whether it's the propane or the snow removal, or you know what repairs we might have on the building. Anyone else? Over here.
Personally, I think we have the best secret going in the whole county. Somehow we need to advertise, we need to tell people, because people are confused, they're upset with the political atmosphere that's going on right now. I mean, we all try to tell our friends that, you know, come to church, but there's a lot of people out there are scared right now. They don't know where to turn, and I do think we need some professional advertising to bring more people in.
Yeah, I think what Ron's telling, I think what you're saying is community needs us. We can be that positive place and that calm in the storm that people are looking for. But if they don't know we're here. I agree.
Best advertisement we have is each of you. In being who you are to your friends and family, to welcome people who walk in the doors and aren't here for us, to feel loved and cared for in some way and seen. It's cool.
Well, and I think what Ron is pointing at is we need a strategy for how are we reaching out to the public? How are we going to, what's our plan for that?
I'm going to read you from Luke 14:25. Now large crowds were traveling with him, and he turned and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost to see whether he has enough to complete it?" $41,000 over a year is roughly $3,500 a month in money we don't know where it's going to come from. And so if you vote for this budget, count the cost of discipleship. That's what it is in money. And the cost of discipleship in action is that the most important thing in your life is the people that you meet every day who desperately need Jesus and need to hear it from us, because there ain't nobody else. So you are committing yourselves to a change. And with the trend over the last 5 years or 6 years, where our income is down every year and our membership is not growing particularly, if we don't change, we're just going to die. So you need to recommit yourself to true discipleship.
like to invite our chair up for I guess we make the motion as the.
Yeah, the
Fine.
motion's been made.
Yep.
And any more discussion? Did the discussion. Okay, we have a ballot. Yes. Or is this going to be a ballot vote where it was requested?
I can sit down.
Yes, you can.
If you're a member, can you raise your hand and keep it up until I give you a piece of paper? So Beth Ann or I give you a piece of paper?
Yeah. So you have a ballot in front of you. The yes vote is we are going to accept the ballot as, the budget as proposed. A no vote is, no, we don't like this ballot, this budget. Sorry, I got a ballot in front of me. This budget, and you want us to go back to redo it. Please, please, don't make us. Anyway, and abstain, of course, you might not agree with the ballot budget, but you just don't want to say no. So circle one and pass it in.
Did we miss anybody on the elections?
Who's going to count? Do we have an update on the bridge campaign? I guess not. We're having a 30th anniversary. We have a date for it. I think it's in September. The 20th, September 20th. Write it down, put it down. We're having a big party. And we're going to be celebrating 30 years of being Monadnock Covenant Church. And as you've heard, Sherry Page is putting together a 30th anniversary cookbook. So if you have recipes, please give them to her. She wants to make a nice, big cookbook. Yep.
Be cautious, it takes at least 15 to 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah.
So, 105 questions is a lot. Yeah.
No, we're happy to do it, but we just wanted to let everybody know that it takes time.
When you set yourself down to do it, plan on the time, because you don't want to be discouraged and that you thought it was going to be 10 minutes. It takes time.
Diane, you said September 20th.
Yes,
It's a Saturday.
yes.
It doesn't correspond.
Yes. Then whatever's that Saturday is. The 21st, 22nd, 19th.
I get the 20th for a Saturday. Yeah, it's a Saturday. Well, we don't know yet. Oh, and we're going to have like stations. It's going to be so cool. Nancy Carlson, is she here? Yeah. She and Sherry have been working on it, and there's going to be different stations with different parts of food that has a connection with MCC. I've got the Swedish table. Yeah. So it's going to be a really good time. It's not going to be a stuffy place where you got to dress up and all that. It's going to be a really nice celebration. Okay, we have the vote. We have 25 yes, 3 no, and 1 abstain. So the budget is passed. Thank you very much. And thank you again. It's never enough to thank, but the finance team, just thank you for all the time you've put in. It's just amazing. Okay, and
To adjourn. Or
Yes.
am I praying first? Praying first?
yeah, pray first.
I'll pray first. Let's pray. God, we do thank you for conversations that can be hard, that can be good, that can be discerning, that can be hard. So we pray that you would lead and guide us this year. As Stan said, $3,500 a week can feel overwhelming. And while we don't expect that to rain from the sky, we do expect that you will show up and lead us. May we still continue to go forth to shine a light to our community so that people who, the 90%, maybe might begin to be able to experience who you are through us. Because our strongest desire is to be your hands and feet, God, so that your kingdom might be built in our relationships, in our community, and throughout the world. Amen.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Do I have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Hey, we haven't voted yet. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Goodbye. Have a good afternoon.